weeks ago, Brian, Craig,
Yep.
you guys were in Atlanta,
Yes, sir.
and a little group of players named Team Lotus Box, they put on a clinic, for lack of a better term, yes?
They cleaned up. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they made this thing look easy in Atlanta. Now, they didn't win the tournament. Grixis Death Shadow won the tournament, and we'll get to that deck in a little bit here. But it was Simic Urza and Simic Wurza, because it does have word invention, that absolutely destroyed this tournament. Craig, I'm going to start with you because you were there, and we'll bring it all the way back from there. Urza is obviously one of the most powerful cards in the format. This might be the best Urza's deck now. It's kind of hard to argue otherwise, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, the deck just came together as such a tight little package where there's so many synergies going on. The addition of the cryptic commands and the mystic sanctuaries to get them back is just this extra layer on top of their combo-y aggressive starts, and then Oko just sitting there just being an absolute killer for the mid-game. You know, the deck was very impressive, and it just overperformed for everyone that played it.
Brian, you were also there. You got to see Gilded Gooses in that deck now. You got Oko in that deck. So we've got a bunch of new cards from Throne. You mentioned, Craig, Mystic Sanctuary to loop Cryptic Commands. You've got Thopter Foundry plus Sword. We have the Brokenness of Urza. I mean, I think everybody knows coming in that this is probably the deck to beat. Brian, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And if you are a subscriber to SCG Premium, as everyone should be, already shrilling.
There it is.
Get it out of the way.
There it is.
You might have seen Mox Insights and their article breaking down SCG Atlanta. The win rate of this Urza deck was preposterous. It was pushing like 70%. And granted, some of the best players in the room definitely playing it. Team Lotus Box has been dominant all season long here on the SCG Tour. But this deck is the truth, and it's combining this strategic flexibility, having all these game plans, being able to whir for key bullets, being able to set up the Cryptic Command, Mystic Sanctuary lock, but also it's just got three threats that win the game on its own. If you play Emery, if you play Oko, or you play Urza, a lot of times that's just enough. Those cards are extremely, extremely powerful and can run away with games. So that is 100% the deck I'm watching for in Modern right now.
Look, that deck's got some play to it. There are some decisions to be had when you're playing the games, but the nice thing about that deck is sometimes it's just like, well, my decisions matter, but my deck is so powerful that like I can just kind of figure it out. We also have Moxes in that deck, right?
Yeah.
Opal,
Oh, yeah.
Amber?
Yeah. Sometimes you
Sometimes
occasionally
Amber?
see one Amber float into the deck.
Okay.
The version that was in Atlanta, no Ambers at that point, but online I've seen Amber pop up occasionally.
Sure, so this is just no bad cards then, Patrick? Is that what we're looking at here?
I mean, we covered sort of the early evolutions of Urza-style decks on the SCG Tour, and you and I think, both had the criticism on and off air that there's just a lot of air in these decks.
Yeah.
You get these really explosive starts where you have all this mana, and then your Emery dies, and you have nothing to do. You are waiting for one of your 8 payoff cards, maybe.
Yep.
Deck flooded out a ton. We saw this come up over and over again with the early iterations of the deck.
Oh, those Paradoxical Outcomes were horrible.
Right.
I'm
Now-
sorry, they were bad.
So much substance is in the deck.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about Oko is both it is something that can facilitate your most explosive draws. You play it early, you have a sea of artifacts on the battlefield, and now you can you totally dominate the battlefield. And the big thing for the deck is also it's a normal card that can be played against resistance.
Yep.
The early builds of Urza, I think they were just not very good at playing to the battlefield absent their best combo draws.
Yep.
And now with cards like Oko and Cryptic Command, you can play a normal game on the battlefield without giving up your most explosive draws. And I think the blend of those two things has put this deck on the top of Modern right now.
You know, we internally and then externally changed this tournament, a half of it from Standard to Pioneer, and we'll get to Pioneer a little bit later. And you know, Standard is what it is. Craig, you know, you were the Pro Tour, I was at the Pro Tour. We all know what happened to the Pro Tour as far as Oko's domination. Thought maybe we'd see a little less Oko this weekend. I don't think that's going to be the case in Modern. I played against this deck in a Modern PTQ while I was in Richmond last weekend. I was playing humans. I learned that Oko just makes Meddling Mage and Freebooter and a bunch of cards look embarrassing. I Meddling Mage named Urza. I was like, I'm feeling pretty good.
Yep.
My opponent turned into an elk, and then I lost like immediately. And that's a lot of like Oko just solves a lot of problems and is just good too. Like in Standard, it's just good, right? It doesn't really solve these problems because there's no Meddling Mages and stuff running around. But Craig, in Modern, like you're shutting off things that matter, chalices, like you're doing all these things with Oko that are outrageous.
Yeah, it's funny because we see that these decks play a couple of bullets that they can tutor for, and then sometimes they get to swap the bullet onto the opponent's side of the board with Oko, stealing their best creature.
Sure.
And you leave them with a damping sphere that still has its effect. Things like that are just so fun to me. Like it's great to see these oddball scenarios come up where it's like, oh, my hoser card is also part of my combo where I steal your best creature and it's still hosing you.
Yeah, no, I didn't even think about that because that didn't happen in the match I played. But thinking about all of the interactions and the fact that, and I also ran face forward into this. My opponent played Urza, and they were tapped out.
Okay.
I got Cryptic Command real good.
Yep.
Had no idea that was coming. Like, if you know how to play this deck, and I imagine those Team Lotus Box guys did. I don't want to be hyperbolic and say best deck, but it sure seems close, Brian.
Yeah, it's in the discussion. I do think there are ways to target it.
Okay.
I want to pivot back to Oko real quick just for a second, because I think Oko is interesting in the context of Modern. One of the real squeezing points of Modern for a long time was sideboard space.
Sure.
You often had to dedicate a lot of your sideboard slots to very linear strategies, or you just get blown up by them. Things like Dredge, Affinity. If you didn't have appropriate hate cards, you would get destroyed. Oko brings this extremely, extremely diverse sideboard plan to any deck capable of casting it. You have answers for all the problematic cards against you, and you also have a threat engine. Like, I played Oko in my Amulet Titan deck last week down in Richmond, and just playing against Jund and having persistent 3/3 attackers, I was able to manage my opponent's Ashioks. You just get all these angles of play for not only this Urza deck, which, like you said, among the best decks, but so many decks in Modern are going to pick up Oko and use it to its full strength, because it's an absolutely absurd card. It's not that hard to really utilize it.
Is Urza the best card in Modern, do you think, Patrick? Is there a best card?
I don't know if there's a single best card. I'm always going to default to the cards that cost 0 or 1 because the opportunity cost is so low. But I think it's more informative to talk about decks rather than individual cards.
Sure.
And I think Urza and Oko present the foundation, and Mox Opal present the foundation for the best deck in the format. You can argue how you want to define most powerful card, but I think that collection of cards is currently the best thing to be doing.
Well, you like cheap spells. I know that. You were a big fan of Infect for a while. You also like Grixis Death Shadow for a while, and that's a deck that won Atlanta. So as good as Simic Urza was, it didn't win the tournament. Someone got through all these Lotus Box decks, and these players that have been great on the SCG Tour, they did it with the old avatar there, the 1313. So Patrick, you like cheap cards. This has discard, even though Veil Summer is legal in this format, so maybe
Gotta keep track of, yes,
yeah,
that
which,
one's still,
which,
right,
which
this one's still legal for now, I guess.
Yes, correct.
Right.
Monday, who knows? But Grixis Death Shadow was able to get the job done there. It's still good. I don't know how good, and it did win the tournament where Lotus Box destroyed that thing, and Lotus Box, they're some of the best players on the SCG Tour, so this has to be a viable choice coming in this weekend, I would think.
No question, and I never fault anyone who wants to play Death Shadow in Modern, be it Jund or Sultai or Grixis, whatever the 3-color shell is. It's just a lot of really powerful interaction, a lot of individually powerful cards, really good ways of leveraging the sideboard. You have Snapcaster Mage, so all your sideboard cards that are spells kind of get that 2x multiplier.
Yep.
It's extremely good, and I think that if you're looking to fight Oko, now this is the tough part. The deck itself is quite bad against a resolved Oko.
That's what it appears.
You have 5/5s and you have Death Shadow, which you're aspiring to be bigger than that, and Oko takes care of all of that.
Yep.
So that's the problem. The upside is you are overloaded with 1-mana cards that can preemptively or on the stack negate Oko at a really favorable exchange. So a lot of the game is going to come down to your ability to manage that fight specifically. The rest of the deck that you can kind of handle with discard and counter spells or removal spells in the case of Urza. A resolved Oko is so problematic that that's really going to be the foundation for the whole game.
Well, Brian, first of all, do you agree with that? And second of all, you of course did cast that tournament, so I'm sure you watched Grixis Death Shadow go up against Simic Urza. What did you take away from watching those matches?
I think the matchup is slightly in Death Shadow's favor. Slightly, very slightly. And that's kind of the story of Death Shadow, is that with perfect play, you get a lot of slightly favorable matchups. So if you have invested the reps into this deck, I think it is 100% a defensible choice for this tournament, but it requires a very high level of mastery. Certainly there's many players here on the SCG Tour who have achieved that mastery with Death Shadow, and every now and then a Death Shadow ringer kind of comes out of the woodwork like we saw in Atlanta. I don't think anyone had eyes on the eventual winner of that tournament as one of the people to watch, but his play throughout the tournament was masterful with Death Shadow, did a very nice job. So if you have put in the repetitions, I buy that being right on the limit of acceptable choices for Modern. It's very hard to be fair in Modern, and it's also very hard to define Death Shadow as a fair deck when a lot of the spells are free. There's the Mishra's Baubles, the Street Wraiths. It has a very high actions per turn rate for a fair deck, and I think that's essential to be able to succeed in Modern. So I do buy it. A little bit lower on it against the rest of the field, though. I think it's doing a good job hard targeting what all of us are perceiving as the best deck right now in Simic Warza.
Craig, you were there as well. What's your takeaway with Grixis Death Shadow, especially coming into this particular weekend?
So I think Brian said just the right thing there at the end, where it's within the context of the metagame. I think right now Death Shadow is a very good way to attack the metagame. There's a lot of semi-fragile but very fast decks running around, and Death Shadow just has so many efficient answers and so many ways to disrupt things cheaply that it's very effective at fighting this metagame. If we had the very slow, control-ish blue-white metagame, I don't think you can show up with the Death Shadow deck and be that successful, but that's not where we're at right now.
That is definitely not where we're at right now. And I don't know for you Azorius fans how good that deck is looking this week, and I don't expect very much of it, that's for sure. That said, there's always Tron, I think, right?
Sort of.
Look, there are people who have Tron decks that like them, right?
No, I think you're right. I think there is always Tron. The addition of 8 Karns instead of 4, where you complete your Tron on 3, you have Karn, either one, and it's just so impactful. A lot of times you just tutor up a Trinisphere and slam it onto the board in the same turn. Like, that's going to slow down all these decks that are trying to have their actions per turn be very high.
So I ask you, though, because though the London Mulligan has been introduced, and it has helped this deck an immense amount, it doesn't do anything until the third turn of the game, realistically. It's trying to get its mana online, and then, as you mentioned, we can see 4 mana Karn plus Trinisphere, 7 mana Karn. The next turn after that, we're seeing Oblivion Stone, all that other stuff. In a weird way, and this is a weird thing to say, Brian, is that too slow?
Yes.
Now.
Yeah, I just think it is. I mean, 4 mana Karn, excellent card in this format right now. I agree with Craig on that point, but I'm a huge fan of our friends over at Mox Insights, and they mine all this data from all of our Modern tournaments. If you have watched their work, Tron has been horrible for a while now. And not like it's been like a 50% deck. It's been a losing deck for a while. It has not put up meaningful results in a very long time, but it's extremely highly represented at every single one of these tournaments. Like you said, a lot of people love their Tron decks.
Yeah.
So people keep bringing it out, but I don't think it's producing the results right now. I just don't think it lines up well with the rest of the Modern format. There's no Jund around to punish. There's no blue-white around to have, I mean, even that is a questionable matchup, but that's what this deck was meant to do, go over the top of slower decks. There's no slower decks anymore. That doesn't exist in Modern right now.
You agree with that, Patrick?
There's no chance you could get me to play Wormcoil Engine in this tournament. There's no chance. It's not in the ballpark of what the games are about right now.
Sure.
And, you know, obviously I have my biases. The type of person who's like, all I want to do is play with the cards that cost 0 and 1 that are good, are probably not going to be into a deck that doesn't do very much until the third turn of the game.
Sure.
So I acknowledge that as a bias, but there's just too many of the setting aside the speed of the deck, which I don't think is just up to snuff for where the format is right now. So many of your payoff cards just aren't about what the games are about.
Sure.
If you knew for sure that your Wormcoil on 3 and your Karn, either one on 3, would be good against the field at large, maybe we can have a conversation about it, but we're not there right now. And when those cards aren't pulling their weight, I just don't see Tron as a viable choice.
Well, there's another big mana deck. So we don't like Tron, we don't like Karn, at least for right now. Wouldn't surprise me if we made top 8 because it just happens sometimes. There's Amulet Titan. There's your boy Matthew Dilks in the house. He's almost certainly doing that. So let's talk about Primeval Titan. This is a big mana strategy that's faster than Tron in some instances and can do more explosive things. Would you go that route? I mean, this costs 6, but there are cards that cost 1.
I think this deck is significantly better than Tron.
Okay.
I don't even think it's a proper analogy to Tron. I know they share some similarities as big mana decks, but the cards that are good and bad against both of these strategies are very different. I think random Stone Rains are much better against Tron than against Primeval Titan strategies, but I think Discard is much better against Primeval Titan Titan strategies than against Tron, so it's not totally analogous, but yes, this deck has a ceiling that is high enough to compete with the fastest decks in the format. I think it's more robust against the sideboard cards that people are more likely to have, and you have some bullets available to you in game one. Like, what do you get off of having a main deck Bajuka Ba you can go find? What does that do to your win rate? Tron doesn't really get to play with those kind of cards in the first game, often even not even the sideboarded games. And for all those reasons, if you wanted to go in that sort of direction with a big mana strategy, I would much prefer to play something like Amulet Titan than Tron.
Brian, I know you're pro Amulet Titan. You have been for a while. For a hot minute earlier this year, maybe about a month, it was the best thing to be doing.
Yep.
You know, it comes and it goes. It's still very powerful. It got like the new castle, Garen Brigg, which has been a nice addition.
Yep.
How do you feel about it coming into this weekend?
I think the deck has no question gotten tremendous upgrades over the last few months. You mentioned Castle Garen Brigg. More important though, Once Upon a Time.
Yep.
This is
That card good?
I mean, it's an absurd card. This is one of, if not the best Once Upon a Time decks in Modern.
Okay.
So that's a huge upgrade. I guess the way I see Amulet Titan right now is that there's nothing it's really preying on. It's presenting a bunch of fine matchups, but those really good matchups are mostly absent from the field. But at the same time, the real predatory stuff is gone as well. There's not a lot of Blood Moons, and that was always the thorn in Amulet Titan's side. You just don't see much Blood Moon these days. So that's certainly a feather in Amulet Titan's cap. I think it's a fine choice for this tournament. If you're a master, if you're a Matthew Dilks, you can make a good argument for playing this deck. I don't think it's the best choice for the weekend, though.
Okay. Craig, how do you feel?
It's wild because the metagame just evolves so fast right now, where there's just literally from week to week, we just see these big shifts where people catch up and pass what was good the week before. And you're talking about the Blood Moons. It just feels like, I don't know, less than a month ago, there was a ton of Blood Moons running around, and now it's just completely unplayable. It's just wild, all those shifts, all those changes. So what I'm looking forward to seeing for this event is who's made that next evolution. We showed up a couple weeks ago and we saw the Simic Urza deck just destroy the event, and that was the next evolution.
Yep.
And now it's a question of, are people just playing that deck, or is there a step further, or potentially has someone gone too far where they take two steps? They think everyone else is going to move up to this next thing. They're going to beat that thing, and people say, no, this thing's already too good. We're not moving off of it yet. You know, so that's what I'm looking forward to this weekend, is to see where our best players are at, how far they push the metagame, and what evolution we're on at this point.
And the thing about Modern that we all know is that it's a very diverse format. So there's Infect as a deck, which could be pretty good right now. And I've heard people have been using that deck to prey on Urza-based strategies. They have some difficulty with Blighted Agent, which makes a lot of sense. There's Burn, which seems fine right now, probably not at its best right now. But there are plenty of things to be doing as far as other strategies are concerned. I do think that these Urza, Mox Opal, Henry, Oko, God, all the cards in this deck are so good.
They're absurd.
I mean, this deck, it's also flexible. It also has room for upgrades and changes with all the bullets it can play. I think everybody knows it's the deck to beat going in. I do think it's a difficult deck to beat. Managing Oko is difficult. Using Urza correctly is difficult, so on and so forth. So that'll be interesting to watch unfold over our Modern rounds, which of course is kind of the back half of the tournament. That'll be rounds 5 through 8. Let me make sure I get this right. 13 through 16.
Well done. Good mathing.
Thank you very much. Still kind of got it here early this morning. But we know you guys are here for more talk about this event, and more importantly, Pioneer Conversation. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Magic's newest format where you can't play Veil of Summer. We'll be right back.